So here I'm in Barcelona with Nick Clegg. The ABS is taking place, the sun is shining, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And there's a lot of conversation in the fringes of the event here about Brexit, not surprisingly.
Yes.
Just interested to know where you think we are right now on Brexit.
Tricky question. I don't think anybody knows where they are, but we are clearly approaching a moment of a pivotal moment, a real sort of denouement in this whole what I would regard as sort of sorry saga, because the government in London, in Whitehall, has committed to presenting to MPs a deal of some shape or form, which is being cobbled together between David Davis and Michel Barnier in the autumn and the winter. And so this summer is going to be a crucial time, not only in the negotiating room, in other words, can the British government overcome its own internal differences, which are almost paralysing some of the decisions that need to be made about future trading arrangements, but can it then come to a meaningful agreement with the EU 27 such that they can put a substantive package to Parliament in the autumn and the winter? My hunch is that if the talks do not collapse, which they could, because there are some really, really knotty problems, particularly around this issue of the Irish border, where there will be a border, which didn't previously exist, and yet everybody's sort of saying they don't want to have a border, but the British government can't explain how they're not going to have a border if there is a border, if you see what I mean. So it might collapse, but if it doesn't, I think the most likely scenario is that the government will present to the British Parliament quite a lot of concrete, specific detail on things like the money paid to the British government into EU coffers in the future, the rights of EU citizens in the UK and of UK citizens elsewhere, but will almost be condemned to be rather vague on everything else, because there's just no feasible way. I mean, there's no earthly manner in which the government has the time, or at the moment the wherewithal, to cross the T's and dot the I's on the future, particularly trading relationship with the European Union. So curiously, after all this sort of fury and drama, I wouldn't be surprised if MPs are basically going to be asked to vote for quite vague stuff, a sort of promise of it all sorted out in the future. Now, if I was an MP, I wouldn't accept that, because I don't think you should vote for a future if you don't know what it is. But that's what I suspect will happen in the next few weeks and months.
And of course, all this leads to a sense of political uncertainty in the UK. I mean, how uncertain is the political environment in the UK right now?
Very. I certainly don't. I was in elected politics in one shape or form for close to 20 years, and I certainly can't ever recall a time which is as febrile and as fluid as all of this. And anyone who pretends they know, what the future holds, I think, is a sort of charlatan or a fool. It's so unpredictable now. I think the EU referendum on the 23rd of June 2016, I always compare it to like a sort of atom-splitting moment. It creates lots and lots of aftershocks and after effects and chain reactions, economically, socially, and definitely politically as well. It creates profound ructions within the two larger parties. Oddly enough, the ructions are as great, if not greater, in the Labour Party than they are in the Conservative Party. So I think it's really difficult to predict how things will unfold. I think the one thing which will not happen, which is that oddly enough, the thing that a lot of people spend far too much time, in my view, speculating might happen, is that sort of one day Brexit will be, sort of like a sort of tick box exercise. It'll happen on a Tuesday afternoon. It's not like that. This thing is going to overshadow British politics and British debate for many, many years, and will be accompanied by a lot of political volatility. We might see an early general election. We might see the emergence of new political parties. We might see a change of leadership in both the larger parties. So I'm afraid I think volatility and uncertainty is the name of the game for some time to come.
And here we are in Spain with a new government, Italy change of government as well. Any lessons to be drawn from the changes we've seen more widely in Europe politically?
Well, I think they're different, and Spain is in better shape economically, having sort of taken the tough medicine in the wake of the financial crisis in recent years. Spanish politics, of course, is entirely dominated at the moment. We're here in Barcelona by the issue or the demand of Catalan independence and the after effects of the constitutionally unrecognised referendum some months ago. Whereas, of course, in Italy it's rather different. I think there is a wider lesson particularly in the Italian situation, for the European Union, which is that for a country such as Italy, or indeed Spain or Portugal or Greece, but part of this band of southern countries that were economically in a very, very distressed state, and of course because they were part of the Eurozone, they were not able to devalue themselves out of trouble. They couldn't sort of manipulate the value of the currency in order to get themselves out of a sort of tight spot. So under immense pressure from Brussels and Berlin, they had to then enact very, very painful reforms. You saw skyrocketing unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. And in Italy, that then combined with this huge Mediterranean refugee crisis, where tens of thousands of desperate people were fleeing across the Mediterranean, many of them perishing on makeshift sort of dinghies in the Mediterranean. And in my view, the European Union didn't give nearly enough help to the Italians. So if you're an Italian voter and you feel that you're being somewhat put upon by the kind of austere fiscal orthodoxy of Northern Europe, and then you have to kind of deal with the huge inflow of folk from elsewhere, and you're not really getting as much help as you think you deserve from the rest of Europe, to me, it is not remotely surprising that millions of Italians say, well, to hell with the status quo, and we don't believe in the mainstream parties, we're going to go with the populists, the five-star movement, or even more so the Liga. And so I do think one of the things that the European Union needs to reflect on is what it does to deal with these north-south tensions in the Eurozone, and how it more effectively helps countries that are dealing pretty well on their own with this huge refugee crisis. If you don't deal with those things, I suspect you're going to get more Italian-style political reactions from voters.
And finally, lots of people are remarking here that it's 10 years on since the crisis, and the ABS is still in very good shape, and you obviously were at the heart of the UK government post-crisis. Any thoughts from you about where the banking industry is 10 years on, lessons to be learned, issues still to be dealt with as we look forward to the next 10 years?
Well, I think we're still living in the shadow of 2008. That's the first very important thing to remember. By some estimation, real terms incomes in the United Kingdom will not return to pre-2008 levels until 2023. That is a longer period of stagnation in people's take-home pay than has ever happened since in the industrial era. And I think it creates profound anger and distrust with the status quo, and that's going to be with us for some time. I think as far as the financial system is concerned, of course a lot of that public anger was directed totally predictably at especially those parts of the banking system that wildly overstretched themselves, then blew up in our face, and that taxpayers have had to sort of bail them out. I hope over time we can come to a slightly more mature and balanced appreciation that however much people's anger about what the excesses in the run-up to 2008 are justified, and there was excess and there was risk-taking and over-leveraged sort of financial practice which was done at the risk of society as a whole, and that must never ever happen again. I hope there's over time a sort of more mature appreciation as well that a healthy financial system is like a healthy heart in a body. It circulates money around the system. It allows people to take out mortgages, buy cars, use credit cards. It's absolutely essential for the kind of free and open society we want to live in. So I hope as the sort of shadow of 2008 recedes, and it hasn't fully receded yet, the eruption of anger, including legislative and regulatory reactions, some would argue overreactions, which again I think is almost inevitable in these circumstances, that gives way to a more balanced, sober, moderate, less risky, but nonetheless essential part of a modern, sophisticated economy. And I hope, if we sit here in 5 years' time, that mood will be even more settled than it is now.
Nick Clegg, thank you very much.
Thank you.